Here's a review of the 2012 Acura TL 6-speed manual transmission with the super handling all-wheel drive. This car is incredible if you are a car enthusiast and you like a little bit of luxury. Feels kind of like a Honda inside. Does not drive like your normal Honda though. 2012 Acura TL. Pretty simple on the outside. Now, they refreshed this car in 2012. They started this 4th generation in 2009, and it lasted to 2014. Now it's the TLX. All right, but let's get back to this car. It's less beaky. This grille used to look like a beak, like straight up from a bird. It looked terrible for the most part. Some people might like it, but I'm not a big fan. In 2012, they revised it, and this actually looks pretty classy. In some ways, I might like this a little bit more than their shooting star. That's what I call it, the shooting star emblem on their modern Acuras. It's a huge badge. It doesn't have quite as much metal-like material around there. I think they did a good job with the bottom here with the fog lights. I think that looks pretty classy. It's not over-stylized by any means. And I've always liked the TL's headlights. I think they're very classy, simple. We have a couple lines here on the hood. But this car, I mean, like I said, probably as you guys, if you watched my Subaru Legacy video, most sedans nowadays, guys, they all look so similar. Very little sets them apart, especially when you look from the side. We have some nice 5-spoke wheels here and a nice chrome lining around the windows. I believe these are 18-inch wheels. Let's get a little bit closer. Let's dive in. P245 by 45 and 18-inch wheels, like I eyeballed. Okay, have a nice Acura emblem on that wheel. This has obviously the black color. Looks pretty good. This car has been taken care of fairly well on the exterior. I don't see really any blemishes or anything like that. The taillights were also updated, excuse me, for the 2012. So you can see that obviously the super handling all-wheel drive and the nice dual exhaust there. This car looks very, very sharp from the rear. Has a nice rump. And then here's the styling on the other end of the car. But like I said, this was refreshed in 2012. This particular car, it is a super handling all-wheel drive. That means it gets a slightly larger V6, up from 3.5 liter to 3.7 liter. Has over 300 horsepower, about 305 horsepower. A couple other things they added with this particular car on the refresh compared to, let's say, the 2009. They added some ventilated seats. This car does not have them. They added a 60 gigabyte hard drive, which I think they had something minuscule like a 16 gigabyte hard drive beforehand. But the cool thing about that is that you can just put your CD in and you can rip it to the hard drive, something you don't see in modern cars nowadays. And there's a blind spot monitor system in this car as an option. And they also made this car quieter compared to the 2011 and before. It's about 3 decibels quieter on the highway. And if you get the automatic version of this, if let's say you don't care to drive the manual or you don't know how to drive the manual, the automatic transmission on this is a lot better than what it was in 2009. So this car has been updated. The biggest update, in my opinion, is that beak. It looks a lot better. It looks really good in this 2012. So these shocks, guys, and this is a difference in quality between a Lexus vehicle and the small things, Not necessarily the engine or the transmission. I think Honda always does a great job at those components, but these dual shocks can't even hold up this hood. Yes, it is 6 years old, but there's 2 shocks that don't hold up the hood. And this car only has 27,000 miles on it, so it's not like it's been opened or closed that many times. This engine looks phenomenal in here. I'd give it an A+. The whole layout, this engine compartment looks great. So nice job, Honda and Toyota, for knocking it out of the park on the layout and the presentation of the engine. But what's the point of the presentation of the engine if I can't even hold it up? I don't have a stick to hold up the hood, and the shocks won't hold it up. So huge fail on their part there. I know those things can go out over time, but I've never seen it in such a modern car. Alright guys, let's put her in first. Okay, alright, let's do this. So far I like the clutch pedal quite a bit. The last manual I was in was actually a Jeep Wrangler 6-speed, and that car, man, is, oh, that is not the funnest manual I've ever driven, that's for sure. So the friction zone on this clutch pedal is actually kind of at the top, and it's just going to take a little bit getting used to. This car, oh my gosh, this shifter. So I'm sure I'm going to tell you all about this shifter. It's super smooth, and I've heard this about Honda performance vehicles, how smooth they are on the shifter. Oh, it's butter. Oh my gosh, this makes me want to get a manual again, guys. So if you've been following my channel, some of you might know that I used to have, oh, I'm gonna have to change the screen here. Okay. Oh, what? I got a little bit of wheel spin there. It sounded like the front left tire that was making the turn, so holy cow. Welcome myself to a true handling sports car at its deepest core. So let's just get back to the gearbox. Why? Because that's what's standing out to me the most. I'm just cruising along here in 5th gear, going about 60 miles per hour. Okay, there's 5th, there's 6th. Okay, I went from 6th to 4th on, or from 5th to 4th on accident, but I handled it really well. So just like any gearbox, you got to get used to the gate and where the gears are. This is not going to take me very long at all to get familiar with the pattern. Now, it's a very typical pattern, but every single car has a spacing of the gears a little bit different. On the Jeep Wrangler with its long throws, I can never find the right gear. It takes me a long time. I would say probably about 20 minutes of driving the car to get familiar with where the gear is that I want to select. This car, I'm already used to it. Yeah, I missed the last one. That's going to happen when you're driving a manual transmission in a car you haven't been in before. But let's get away from the gearbox for a little bit and just talk about the road feel out here on the freeway. It's a pretty quiet car. It's very comfortable. I don't notice a whole lot of vibration or anything. The steering wheel's rock solid. Now again, there's 27,000 miles on this car. So I left on the super handling all-wheel drive infotainment thing on my instrument cluster, and it tells me where it's. I love this part about it, and I wish Lexus kind of did the same thing, but it tells me which tire is getting the most amount of torque and power sent to it. So I'm gonna just apply a little bit of throttle, and here on the freeway at highway speeds, it's mostly the power is going to the front wheels for maximum efficiency. So a big fan of that. I want to say Infiniti and a lot of their sport coupes, the all-wheel drive system defaults to the rear wheels first, and then will send power to the front. This is more so front biased and then rear if necessary. But I'm going to do a different test drive with this car than I usually do, so I can get a little bit more acceleration and familiarity with this gearbox. Oh, to a red light. Lame. Engine braking, guys. Engine braking is not... It's somewhat strong in this vehicle. Not as strong as I would like it. Now, I'm coming from the most experience in a manual transmission I've had in a car. It was going to be an NA Miata. It was a 1991. And engine braking on that car is like, you hardly ever have to use the brakes. But it's fairly strong in this car. Not as strong as I would like it, but I mean, they got to find a balance between sportiness and comfort. So it's completely fine the way it is. We'll get to do a short little acceleration test here. Here we go. Red light. Oh! Oh, okay. So the good news is I'm first at this red light. There are no cars in front of me, so it was meant to be. So I have a Chevy Sonic LT edition. That just smoked me off the line. I got it back. I got it back. Wow, okay. This car accelerates very quickly. I didn't realize how fast I was going. I hope there's no cops because this is construction. But this car, I was at 70. I don't even know if I was on 100% throttle either. I'm just gonna cruise in fifth here, but that was exhilarating. I got smoked off the line by the Sonic. It got me for the first like 30 feet, but I caught up to him real well. But this car, man, it accelerates very well, and it's not so much, as you guys know, if you like manual transmissions, the automatic may very well be faster than this car. And a lot of the times with modern transmissions, the automatics are faster because they can shift quicker, unless you're like a professional manual transmission driver. But even then, the quickest transmissions are far faster than a person shifting through their own manual gears. But does it feel faster? No, it doesn't feel faster if you drive the automatic transmission. You don't get the change in the G-forces, quite the same differences in RPMs. It's just a totally different feel in a manual transmission than in an automatic transmission. And I wish Lexus, I bring them up, right? I wish the GS had manual, but they just don't sell. No one in America cares for manual transmissions anymore. And it's a dying breed. The only way you can find manual transmissions, and most of the time, I know BMW still does it. I wouldn't be so surprised if Audi still does manual transmissions. Acura, maybe, if you're lucky. See, I just smoked that RL. Smoked that RL. And that's 60. You know, I wasn't going 100% there. I'd say I go like 80 to 90% of what this car is capable of. And it's just so much, and the gearbox, like I said, is so satisfying. It kind of just snicks into place. And I've always wanted to drive a nice Honda or Acura gearbox because I hear they're some of the best. So very, very impressive overall with this car. It accelerates just fine. Oh, traffic, lovely. It accelerates better than you need it to, right? Because it's luxury. So no one really needs it to accelerate and I'll have to put the 0 to 60 times up here, what this car technically is capable of. And you can see there is a guy throwing cones in the back of the truck. Let's get back on the throttle here. And I'm back up to speed. Just left it in second and she just goes. Very smooth, and this V6 is very, very smooth. The least they could have done, at least in the super handling all-wheel drive, because it is an upgrade for the engine, they could have They could have made the engine at least sound a little bit more involving, a little bit more menacing, like they do in the GS. The GS, that car sounds awesome. When you get into the throttle, they have that exhaust tuned so good in that car. In this TL, it's very, I would say it's pretty disappointing. The engine sounds good, but it's a fraction of what it should sound like. There we go. Ooh. You know, the engine note could be a lot better. In our Lexus GS 350, very similar engines, maybe a couple tenths of a liter smaller, a little bit, tiny bit more horsepower, not quite the handling super handling all-wheel drive system, but the engine note on that car is 5 times better than this car. But here we go in the twisties. Let's see how she handles. Oh my goodness. Okay, yeah, one of the best handling cars I've been in a while. That was a lot of fun around that hairpin turn. Super handling all-wheel drive. It feels like when you get them to the throttle at the apex of the turn, it just takes off like a rocket. There's no wheel spin. It's 100% planted, and it was a lot of fun. Now, our GS is all-wheel drive too, at least the ones I see, and it handles pretty similarly. It's a lot of fun in the GS. The GS is far more luxurious on the inside. This TL, why am I comparing it to the GS, and why am I mentioning the GS so much, is because that is the car that's going to be the most similar to this in the Lexus lineup. I'm sure performance is similar, handling is similar, luxury and interior is a lot better in that GS. But this car, no Lexus vehicle is quite as engaging as this car because it has a manual transmission. So nice work, Acura and Honda, for having amazing gearbox. I have no issues with it, and I'm gonna get into it a lot more here because it's a ton of fun. And I will get another manual transmission before I die. That's on my bucket list. Probably in a Miata, but if Acura keeps making them, this makes more sense because it's a family car. Let's do a little downshift. Oh yeah. So this car boogies, man. It's got 306 horsepower, but as you guys know, when you're in a manual transmission, the horsepower is like amplified by like 2 times if compared to an automatic transmission. And it's just that the level of engagement that you have is again multiplied exponentially when you're in your manual transmission. You become one with the vehicle. Unfortunately, none of our Lexus vehicles have manual transmissions anymore. There's a couple of reasons for that. They're not quite as efficient. Back in the day, manual transmissions were always more efficient than their automatic counterparts, but technology has come so far that you have like 9, 8, 9, 10 speed automatic transmissions that give you way better fuel economy than the manual, but they're not nearly as fun if you know how to drive. A manual transmission. Get in front of that CRV there, doesn't stand a chance with its CVT. When you're just babying this transmission, it is so smooth, and I've mentioned this obviously several times already, but when you're just babying this transmission, it's just so effortless to shift gears. So many people are afraid to learn a manual transmission because they actually have to think while they're driving. People don't like thinking while they're driving. But this car just, if I was learning on this car, I mean, all manual transmissions are fairly similar, but this car just shifts so smoothly. It's so satisfying. Once the gear selector fits into the gear itself, it's just, you get a great feel. It's a nice and buttery transition. And the clutch is great in this car. I would give the gearbox a 10 out of 10. The engine, probably like an 8. Not necessarily because it's down in power. I think it has plenty of power. It's that they didn't attune the exhaust at all in this car, so it's kind of disappointing on that. And steering, I would give it a 10. Styling, meh. Styling in this car is probably like a 7. What else? Oh, interior is probably like a 6. Backup camera is decent. If we're going to give it a backup camera score, we're going to give the backup camera an 8. It doesn't have projective lines, they're fixed, but it looks pretty good. And I parked it like a glove. Let's parking brake on. And we should probably finish up this review for like the 5th time, since I keep driving this car and I want to add more thoughts to it. So yeah, the interior guys, like I said, it's probably a 5. The seats are great. The doors, I think they did a good job on the doors, but I mean, a little bit too much plastic for my liking. The dash is very, very not luxury. It's very Honda. So it feels like a decked out Honda instead of a luxury vehicle. But I'm, you know, I have Lexus to compare in terms of luxury. So Lexus is my my golden sample, which I compare everything into comparison. The only other vehicle for interior wise that I've been impressed with as much as Lexus has been the newer Volvos. Have been in the XC90s. I've heard some different stories on the smaller Volvos. They're not quite as nice on the inside, but those XC90s are fantastic. But let's finish up this review for the 5th time. That sums it up for the review of the 2012 Acura TL. It's a great car. And this particular one, if you know how to drive a manual transmission, this is the one to get, guys. The gearbox is flawless. The clutch feels great. The handling's amazing, especially with this all-wheel drive system. And you get a little bit more horsepower in this car over the non-super handling all-wheel drive version. If you can find a good one, a used one with low miles, even with higher miles, I mean, still Acura, it's a Honda, it's going to run for a long time. Pick up one of these cars, do yourself a favor if you're in the market. See you in the comments below. Hit that subscribe button. See you in the next review.